So, welcome everyone to the final day of the conference, which is also the Transport and Land Use Modelling Forum. Before we get started, I would like to just thank the sponsors of the conference, National Platinum sponsors, Austraffic, WSP, Parsons Brinkerhoff. The national sponsors, Cardno, SMEC, Safe Roads, Metro Count, PSA Consulting and Veach Lister Consulting. I think I said that correctly for John, who also always seems to get that wrong. The conference sponsors, the Queensland Government as the diamond sponsors, the silver sponsor, the City of Gold Coast, bronze sponsors, Austroads and AIMSung as well. So today we've got a bit of a full schedule today. It's going to be pretty punchy. It's going to run through to about 2:15. A couple of things I'd just like to highlight. As you're walking in, everyone would have received hopefully one of these little notes. We're seeking questions off everyone today, obviously relating to transport and land use modelling that we can ask the panel session, which is just before lunch. Make sure the questions are obviously related to the field. They can be technical, they can be adversarial advocacy on toll revenue, but they cannot be about the cricket, so we're not allowed to talk about that. Especially, and the main thing is we do want lots of questions, because if we don't, Dave's promised me he's got some questions that he's going to ask, and if you've heard Dave ask questions, they go on for longer than the speakers. So, we've also got 3 booths from some software providers who have kindly donated some of their time and money out in the foyer, so please go and speak to them. PTV, TSS and City Labs, so make sure you go over and have a chat to those guys as well. So, our first speaker, I've just got to find his CV, which he's written here for me. So, I emailed Rob about 6 months ago and asked him would he like to come out and present at our conference. And the first response was, absolutely, it sounds exciting, look forward to getting over. And obviously a lot of emails back and forth, but it was, we finally got there, and it is with great pleasure that we have Rob Bain presenting today, and I think everyone's pretty excited about seeing what he has to say today. Rob Bain is a chartered engineer who runs a specialist consultancy, RB Consult, out of London. His primary focus is commercial and technical due diligence of investment prospects in transportation, large road and rail projects. His key clients are Canadian pension funds, US insurance companies and government regulatory agencies across the world, including here in Australia. His practice also provides distress, debt advisory and litigation, geez, too many words, Rob. Litigation support services. Rob was a transportation consultant, it's still going, I'm only halfway through it, for many years before joining infrastructure finance ratings team at Standards & Poor's in 2003. After completing a PhD at the University of Leeds, he established RB Consult in 2008. He is retained by Leeds as a visiting research fellow. Rob has published more than 50 papers and articles on PPPs from both a technical and policy perspective. He's a Fellow of the Institute of Civil Engineers and a Fellow of the Institute of Credit Management, and is a peer reviewer for a number of internationally recognised academic journalists. I welcome Rob Bain.
I think I'll do my own introduction in future. How dangerous, how very dangerous. Not only do you invite me into your midst, but you give me the podium. And you give me the podium for an hour and a half. How dangerous. How very dangerous. The subtext of today is a bit of fun with some serious messages. We'll run through for about an hour and then we'll take some questions and answers at the end. Toll road forecasting, yeah, I'll touch on it, but I'm going to go off-piste as you might imagine, quite a bit this morning. That's what I'd really like to discuss, because I think we could do an awful lot better. And I include myself. I'm a transport modeler by profession, although I tend to talk about Amy too, which ages me somewhat. And the younger member of the audience is going, what exactly is that? How to do better. Okay, let's consider it from 4 separate but not unrelated perspectives. Let's look at our product offering, which is the report at the end of the day. Transport modeling or the traffic forecasting report. I review them all the time. I set up my practice about 7 years ago, and I've reviewed 80 traffic and revenue studies, mainly in the road sector, but also in the rail sector as well, from all 4 corners of the planet, from Brazil to Tajikistan. Brazil is actually more dangerous than Tajikistan these days. And at least my clients in Tajikistan aren't in jail. What does a review of our reports tell us about our work? What do our clients tell us? Do we ever ask our clients? I think sometimes we do. We might say, was that all right? And they say yes, and we think that's good. But the word was all right. It was all right. Why don't we ask them, how could we do better? Lawyers. We're never far from lawyers in Australia and traffic studies these days, for one reason or another. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And that was the most difficult bit of the presentation to put together, because I had to get 3 legal firms to look at the slides I'm going to show you today. I'm not joking, and they approved them. And I'll use the word alleged a lot. What does the future hold for us? For those of us who were at the main conference, we heard a futurologist gazing into the future. I'm going to be a little less breathless and excitable. But I'm going to talk about the future because there's big challenges ahead. So, without further ado, let's look at the product offering. First of all, this is my house. This is the metropolis of Weald, population 1,222 people, 1,220 plus myself and my wife. We're 23 miles to the southeast of London, and we're 10,279 miles away from where I'm standing now. But from this little epicenter, you'd be amazed what I get to see. Beach Lister, looking at Clem 7. Northern Motorway, an airport link bidder. Beach Lister again, East-West link. Arup Airport link. Back when it was called North-South Bypass Tunnel, Clem 7. Clem 7 again. Monsel-Acomb, Clem 7, Clem 7. Lane Cove Tunnel. Big names, big projects, all sitting on my desk. And there's little lesson there when we write reports, because do we really know who's going to read them? We think we do because we write them for our clients, but did you know that sitting in the village of Weald, 23 miles to the southeast of London, Bain was reading your report? West Connex, Westlink M7 used to be Western Sydney Orbital. And some of the lawyers took out. The good thing about looking at these reports is if you do it on a daily basis, you can look at them from a cross-sectional basis. You can compare and contrast. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's some standout features. 80 to 90% of the report is focused on calibration of the base year model. Calibration and validation of the base year model. And a couple of pages at the end with some forecasts, a table, sensitivity test or two thrown in for good measure. look back at these reports. Traffic forecasts, traffic modeling, patronage forecasting, traffic report, traffic and revenue forecasts, traffic forecasts. It's all about forecasts. It says so on the front cover. Yet 10% to 20% is actually devoted to the forecast itself. It's like buying a bottle of beer and you look at the alcohol percentage and it says 0.01%. You should be done under the Trade Description Act. In fact, if lawyers went suing you, I'd sue you myself because I'm the one who ends up reading this stuff. The 80-20 rule, 80% on model validation, calibration, 20% at the back end. Look, I'm stylizing this a bit, but this is generally what I find. Yet we call them traffic forecasting reports. Time for a bit of a rethink. Well, am I suggesting that 80% of the report should be based on the forecast? No. This is what I'm suggesting, that 80% of the intelligence should go at the back end. Because that's where we, as traffic professionals, can add value. That's where what our clients are looking for. Our clients can go and collect data. PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young and all the bright boys and girls in the management consultancies, they can go and get the data, same as us. But we're traffic and transportation professionals. That is the skill set we're selling to our clients. And in this context, we're talking about forecasts. The bulk of the report should be focused here, insight, intelligence, and value add. And it isn't, but it should be, and we need to change that. Clear focus on the future. And this is a theme I'm going to build on through the next 50 minutes. How was the report? It was okay. Let's be a bit more proactive. How could I do better? Let's ask the clients. Here's some of them, some of my clients, probably some of yours as well. Pretty mixed bag. Insurance companies, private equity houses, banks of various colours and persuasions, state governments, national governments, a couple of lawyers, asset management companies. Let's go to the clients and ask the simple question. How could we be better? Not was it all right. So I did. And I compiled all the responses. And very interesting indeed, because despite this broad community of clients, there was a number of clear themes emerged. And I'm going to go through the top 10 that I compiled. In summary, this is where they focused on: transparency, understanding, grounded, real, building on lessons, building on evidence, working with other experts, and I'll develop that theme. Embracing, not hiding from volatility and uncertainty, embracing it, telling people what it means for them. Focusing not on a single point future, but on a range of outcomes. This isn't me, this is what the clients were saying. Think like me, put yourself in my shoes, they said. Push information, don't wait to be asked. And I'm almost evangelical on the subject of the narrative, the traffic story. And I'll run through a couple of miscellaneous themes as well. Improve transparency. This is what they said. Enhanced rigor in terms of documentation, explanation, and justification. Explain to me how these aren't stupid people. We should be able to explain concisely, logically, and clearly how the model works, what the inputs are, what the key data assumptions are. So many of the reports I read, the assumptions are dotted through the report in different places. I almost have to act like Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out what the assumptions actually are. Tabulate them on a single sheet. Boy, would that help if you ever end up in court. Model strengths, by all means, talk about why the model functions or has been compiled or constructed in a certain way. But don't hide from the weaknesses. These are not stupid people. And these are models at the end of the day. They're gross simplifications of very complex human behaviors. They might be quite mathematically sophisticated, but at the end of the day, they're gross simplifications of complex human behavior. So they're going to have flaws, failings, weaknesses, and we need to explain those so that when people are interpreting our forecasts, they can interpret them in the correct context. Right in English, couple said. Too much mathematical and technical gobbledygook in reports without actually explaining what it means. Not every report, but this is a general theme. This is people's perception of us as a profession. Use breakout panels. I've seen some excellent examples of this, where consultants use a little worked example to demonstrate a particular point or a particular formula, or how something works in the model, etc., etc. Improve the understanding. Take great care with cause and effect. It's the old issue of, if you look over the last 30 years, the number of televisions have increased and the number of suicides have increased, so television drives us all to suicide. We've got to be super careful about this sort of thing. We've got to be super careful when we're saying our assignment looks very good and we match the GEH statistics as mapped out in the New Zealand manual, and therefore our underlying matrix is correct. You cannot. There are an infinite number of matrices which will give correct assignments. And I checked that fact with a number of senior people. Take great care with cause and effect. Be very careful about what you're writing. Benchmarks. Oh, some very polarized views about benchmarks out there in the profession, but not amongst our clients. They want to see benchmarks, comparisons, independent sense checks. For sure this is difficult because your project might be quite unique. The first X in Y. So what does a benchmark mean? But what the client's saying is rather an imperfect benchmark than no benchmark at all. Show me the benchmark and explain why my project differs, because that helps my understanding. Consultants overuse simulation. I actually said stimulation several times during my run-through earlier today. Consultants overuse simulation and underuse empirical evidence. Bridge diagrams. Let's look at one. Do we know what a bridge diagram is? Here's one. Clients love it. Love it. So we're bridging a huge forecasting horizon. 2014 in this instance to 2081. But it could be 2014 to 2015 or 2014 to 2020. What it does is it disaggregates this global issue of traffic growth into its components, and people can start to understand it. The contribution of employment or industrial production, congestion, tolls, the various elements that have gone into the model. Not only does it help clients to understand how the forecast has been compiled, but they themselves may overlay their own level of comfort about certain elements of this. They may say, actually, we had real difficulty with the diesel price argument, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So it allows them to focus on the things that matter. And also, they can start to say, well, congestion, I don't quite buy into that, so I'm going to rein it in a bit. And they'll get to their own level of comfort about what the forecast. But unless we give them this sort of stuff, all they get is 3.2%. Traffic will grow at 3.2%, and they're somehow supposed to interpret, analyze, use, discuss internally, base massive investment decisions on the fact that traffic growth is 3.2%. Bridge diagrams, waterfall charts, absolutely essential. They provide the logic, the intuitive build-up by individual component of traffic growth, breaking out the components as we saw earlier. This is how you really get under the skin of a forecast, not 3.2%, but how it's compiled, how it's built up. It allows risk to be interpreted, communicated internally within their own organization, and understood in this tiered basis rather than this bucketed collective 3.2%. Keep it grounded, keep it real, remain, they used to say remain skeptical about models, remain respectfully skeptical. This is a direct quote. Don't obsess over the mechanics of the model or the creation of the modeling machine to the exclusion of everything else. And this is our great temptation. In fact, this is a great danger. We regress to our comfort zone, the comfort zone. We did the maths at university. We know what a log sum is. That's the easy bit. Arguably, it's the less relevant bit. The relevant bit is about people, people's desires. Why do they want to travel? For what purposes? What's the choice set? How will that choice set evolve in the future? What are the cost differentials? What drives behavior? Give me real-world insight, they want. Less of the mathematical gobbledygook. Get out behind your desk, one said. Go and see what's actually happening. Report back to me. Don't become blind to the model. Don't become model blind. Just because the model says this doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense. Quite often it makes no sense at all. Stop thinking, this was a direct quote from an investment banker, stop thinking that some old patchwork of origin destinations from the year X, cobbled together with some demographics and a sprinkling of traffic counts, gives me anything other than the most imprecise snapshot of traffic and travel behavior. Yet we sell all sorts of promises based on exactly this quite often. And our clients aren't stupid. Lessons from the past. We do some trend analysis, looking at historical data, deriving the mathematical relationships. But the multiples we're looking at, or the elasticities we're calculating, may have been impacted by factors that are not relevant in the future. I'm in Brazil at the moment where truck traffic has gone crazy. And I look and all of a sudden I find this huge there's tax breaks given to the trucking industry. There's a unique period in history, in Brazilian history, of easy access to credit. That's why the trucks have gone crazy. The danger is I build my historical relationship and then forecast it into the future, and the future is different. And the multiples will evolve. The elasticities will evolve. You can look at the elasticity of traffic to GDP and look at different countries at this stage of development, and you'll see that traffic is above GDP at the early stages and drops down to GDP and then falls below GDP. Yet quite often models, I see the elasticities calculated from the past projected into the future as if nothing's going to change, despite evidence showing that it clearly does evolve. I'm not pretending any of this is easy, but our clients aren't stupid. Don't hide from anomalies in the past. Discuss them. It helps me to understand risk, helps me to understand upsides and downsides if these anomalies were to reoccur. What about economic cycles? We've all probably got our favorite line. Models don't forecast turning points, so we don't overlay economic cycles on our forecasts. Of course we don't. It'd be crazy to try and do it. But does that give us a complete excuse to ignore them entirely? Absolutely not. That's a reality. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what size, what shape, what depth, what speed of recovery. But do we really think that when we're forecasting for a 45-year period that there will be no economic cycle involved? Our clients aren't stupid. Can the model backcast? Can it predict the past? Can it predict the present? This at least gives some measure of comfort that the thing is grounded in some form of reality. This was interesting. This came from several of them, and I've seen it happen in one project, but I haven't seen it happen very often. Think team, they say. Don't just think traffic. Think about what I, as a client, am trying to do. There'll be various advisors that I've retained. My pension funds have financial advisors, economic advisors, the traffic advisor, the lawyers, et cetera, and they want us to be thinking that we're part of a team, not just some individual little group bustling away with a mathematical traffic model. Help us to identify gaps in knowledge. Don't leave it to the end and say, well, actually, we really could have done with a better understanding of the trucking industry when trucks account for 70% of your revenues. Suggest to your client that actually what we need here is we need a local trucking expert, somebody who understands how this sector ticks, what makes it move. We did this in Indiana Toll Road simply because of the huge volume of freight movements traveling along this east-west corridor and the massively significant contribution to project revenues. We as traffic consultants, we weren't local experts in trucking movements, so we employed a local trucking expert, and boy, did that bring some color. The numbers didn't change that much, but Jesus, did it help us understand exactly what was happening and what was likely to happen in the future, where the possible upsides and downsides lay. Be proactive. Recommend to your client that we need some assistance. We need some additional input from experts, economists, commodity experts. In Mato Grosso in Brazil, we're the biggest soybean producer, or one of the biggest soybean producers in the world. And that's driving the truck movements, which is driving the revenue, which is driving the commercial case, which makes the price at the end of the day. So we'll employ a commodities expert. Because this isn't happening on a regional basis, this is happening on a global basis. China, as you probably know, is the big destination for much of this soybean produce. But where are the other producers in the world? And where are we in the price point? Are we lowest quartile? Are we high priced? Would a small price differential between us and another country all of a sudden destroy the market in Brazil, which would destroy the truck movements, which would destroy the commercial case for our toll road? And work with these people. So often I've seen the client wants to engage a team of economic specialists. And the economic specialists go off and do their own work, they produce their report, and we can't use it because it doesn't speak in a language that we can facilitate within our mathematical model. We need to be thinking team, and we need to be proactive. Also, I think we have to be a little bit cautious that we don't pretend we're experts in everything. I think this is a big danger. Don't worry about employing an economic expert, we've got our own. We should be a little bit careful pretending to people that we can do everything. And I don't see it as a weakness, I see it as a strength, that we're actually out there engaged and thinking about these issues. How can we help the client? How can we put ourselves in their feet? How can we think team? Embrace, understand the volatility. Don't hide from it. It's there. Our clients aren't stupid. They can see it. Don't flatter it. Don't specify your little Monte Carlo simulation model with some tiny little bits of variability at selected pieces of the modeling architecture, which gives you a delightfully narrow output, and completely ignore correlation, by the way. Don't flatter it. Don't give me unrealistically tight confidence intervals. This isn't me saying this. This is what the clients are saying to me. Mine it and track it through to the forecasts. If there's uncertainty in the population forecast, which of course there is, how does that wash through the modeling architecture to the forecasts? Because it exists, fact. It exists, fact. So why hide from it? We're doing ourselves and our clients a disservice. And population forecasts are arguably one of the variables that has the least amount of uncertainty, because there's only a couple of things that can happen. People are born, people die, or they move in and out of the area. Compare that with GDP forecasts or forecasts of income levels, and the variability associated with population forecasts is tiny. This is what they said. This is where you should be spending your time. A lot of time should be focused on this. Tracking the uncertainty and volatility through the model to tell me as a client what it means at the end of the day when it comes to me interpreting my forecasts. Show me the impact of alternative yet entirely plausible input values, how they wash through to the forecasts. Forecasts on this range of outcomes. Show me the range. This is the reality. They know it's the reality. Construct realistic and meaningful sensitivity tests How many times, and I've done this myself, how many times do we just wobble the variable about by 5 or 10%, and that's our sensitivity test? That's not a sensitivity test. That's diagnostics, just checking that the model works all right. Our sensitivity test really is saying, what is a reasonable alternative value for this variable and why? And what does that mean in terms of washing it through to the forecast? Put yourself in my shoes. I need to field questions internally to my peers, to my boss, etc. Boy, would it be helpful if you could be thinking in that sort of context and feeding me information so that I can deal with these internal questions. Many of you won't be exposed to credit committees or investment boards, but that's the decision-making process, certainly in my world. And these are hostile environments where people are grilled when they present their due diligence results. And the board or the committee decides whether or not to invest, or what the price point would be, or what the key negotiating issues on a particular deal might be, what the make or break issues are. Be aware of the consequences. This is big, serious stuff. It isn't about a little Saturn model, a little ME model, ME4 model. 4.1, thank you. Was that in row? Go on, tell me. Was that in row? No. Early disclosure of anything I might view as a conflict of interest. Interesting, I didn't expect that. The exception was risk appetite. Don't overlay your own. We don't want your own impression of conservative or comfortable or convenient. We want what you think the most likely future is going to be, and we'll overlay our own risk appetite. Thank you very much. Be proactive. Don't wait for the phone call. Push stuff to me. Keep me informed. Just bullet points. A little bit of an update every week. How's it going with the major topics? What's happening with the time scale? No surprises. That should be the key. No surprises. Give me notice of any problem areas, bottlenecks, things mounting up. Don't wait till it's a problem. And I can help you by responding in advance. For sure, this might be uncomfortable at times, but the alternative is horrible, and that is we're 3 days away from producing the end report, and we've got some massive issue that's been causing us problems all along, yet we haven't told anybody. Be imaginative. We're dreadful at this. Absolutely appalling. Reams and reams of text. When a picture or an illustration or a little diagram, something quite simple, even hand draw it. I worked in Puerto Rico for a number of years for the Department of Highways and Transportation, and 2 weeks into the project, the chief executive sat me down at the desk and said, draw the highway network. 2 weeks on the island. Luckily, I was able to do it because I'd been thinking quite a lot about it in advance, but very simple diagrams to show people how things work. Pen and paper, if all else fails. If you don't have the graphic capability, just draw it by hand and show people what the main flows are and why, where they're coming from. Here's Bain. Bain at his favorite, the most popular, the traffic story, the narrative. Numbers are good and important. Numbers are good and important. But the story is good, important, and useful. Give me the story. Give me the narrative. What are the defining characteristics of this corridor or this study area? Why are people traveling? When? How? For what purposes? We don't even write this half the time. We just write some mathematical gobbledygook that says the GEH statistics were okay. How will the study area develop? What are the potential different futures? What really drives growth? Key movements. Why, what, where, when. We're dreadful at this. But this is what they really want, because it helps them to articulate internally. First of all, it helps their own understanding about what the forecasts mean, the context. It helps them discuss it, communicate it internally. The number of times I have seen a client spend, $250,000 on a big survey program, and we don't even report it. It's just used as feedstock for the model. You're throwing away 75% of the value. The value's in the data. The data is about us, people traveling, why they're traveling, what they like, what they don't like, all the imperfections of human behavior and human life. It's all in there. Yet we say, what? We report the headline stats. We did 4,000 SP surveys on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we good representation of the income categories we use, blah, blah, blah. But we don't mine the data. Spend some time mining the data. Tell me what it means. If you don't, you're throwing away half the value. And I've just spent $250,000 in this stuff. This is our job. Our job is to turn data into information, and we don't do it very well at all. In fact, we just chuck data at clients half the time. That's not adding value. Anybody could do that. We're traffic and transportation planners. We're traffic and transportation consultants. This is our job. We are interpreters. We help the client by interpreting what the data means, telling the story, the narrative. This was a direct quote. Supporting stories convey information very well. If anybody's interested, there's a very rich stream of literature on storytelling in the behavioral sciences. And it's a very specific skill, and I don't think we have this skill. We're numbers guys and gals. In fact, we're very, very quick to resort to the comfort of the numbers. Supporting stories convey information very well. And our job, often or not, is a communications job. It's the story that clients repeat and reflect on once the traffic expert leaves the room. I found that very telling. It's the story, a couple of stories in there. Helps people to understand. It grounds the data. It helps them interpret the forecasts. A couple of other things they mentioned. Bit of a surprise here. Not the first one, doesn't surprise me. When projects are so different, why do consultants simply wheel out the same methodology? I sometimes wish, I said this the other day, I sometimes wish that the Chicago area transportation study had never happened. Because ever since then, we've been locked into a mindset that says, 4-step model. Although we heard something very interesting from Jacobs yesterday about tours, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But this is true. We dash to the model. We take the old software out, we populate it with the same stuff, and we crank the handle. And to the client, this just seems strange because the challenges and the projects and the problems are very different, but we seem to be saying one size fits all. Now, it may be the case that actually this is the only way to do it, but for goodness sake, you know, we could be dressing up a little bit better to say, and we're tailoring this methodology in X, Y, and Z because of the characteristics, the specific characteristics of the study area, or the population, or the project itself. Insist on a new chapter in the report. Why might it succeed and why might it fail? Quite interesting. This is what my pension funds do. They concentrate as much outside the project as they do inside the project. They almost spend longer looking at the competition and the competitive dynamics and how those dynamics may evolve in the future as they do looking at the project itself. Yet we focus on the project because we think that's the thing we've got to get right. Demand on the rail link, flows on the toll road, with a little bit of text about the competitive network or the competitive environment. What do you think of this one? Why don't consultants undertake self-funded research to contribute to industry knowledge? It would give them a real competitive edge. Interesting. Not me. That's what they're saying. How many of us actually do that? Very, very few. We're running so fast on our own projects, we don't stop and think, actually, it'd be quite useful to do some meta-analysis of values of time and explain to people why there are huge ranges within individual user classes, or why specific points within that range may be more relevant in one context than another. Internal R&D to give us the competitive edge. Interesting. Note, the following slides have been compiled from public information. I will use the word alleged a lot. I don't think anybody's done this, actually. Looked across all of the lawsuits to say, what do we... No, I'm not interested in the nitty-gritty. What I'm interested in, what does it mean to us as a profession? You know, what are the takeaways? You'll be familiar, the first 3 American roads, I'm involved in most of these as an expert witness on the prosecution side, which is why I have to be a little bit careful, and I won't be taking any questions about this part of the presentation. Macquarie is being sued in the States, as some of you may know, over the forecasts prepared for a small portfolio of toll facilities, largely in the southern states. Lane Cove Tunnel, Sydney. AMP Capital Investors, the cornerstone institutional equity investor versus PB. There's the reference number if you want to look up. Court file number. Claim for 144 million. Progress settled last year. Settlement reported. Of course, we never see the actual amount. We hear little whispers in the grapevine, but basis of the claim. This is really what I want to focus on, because it's the basis of the claim that we should be aware of, because we need to be acutely aware of this in terms of guiding our own behavior. And this isn't just in the toll road sector. This is far broader implications. Hopkins and Honor. Who the hell is Hopkins? He's the lead applicant for a class action, so he represents over 1,000 individual retail investors. Who's Honor? Anybody got any idea? Honor's his wife, stands for another. And she's a joint trustee of their, or she's a trustee of their joint superannuation fund versus AICOM. The River City class action suit. There's the court file number if you want to look it up. There's the claim, 150 million. And we'll see it come to court sometimes next year. The lawyers are never keen that these things happen too quickly. I wonder why. Basis of the claim. Forecasts in the PDS, the product disclosure statement, or rather a letter embedded in the product disclosure statement, which was relied on by investors to make their investment decision, were defective, misleading, and made without reasonable grounds. This is the basis of the claim. Issuing a defective PDS is a breach, and this is the act that has been breached, a breach of the Corporations Act 2001. Bear with me, this will start to make sense as we get towards the end. Claim 7, RCM Finance, the receivers versus AICOM. There's the file number. Portigon, who's Portigon? Portigon used to be West LB, a big German bank. They actually exited from the transaction, but they maintained they suffered a loss, and so we're all in court. Claim, big claim, 1.68 billion. Progress, well, SEC filings report that it's been settled. You can find this stuff, but you do have to know where to look. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the United States, where AICOM are listed. So they have to disclose this information. You won't find this if you don't know where to look. The class action, the one on the previous slide, this Hopkins and his wife, remains pending. Basis of the claim, again, the important issue for us to take away. AICOM allegedly made representations regarding its forecasts that amounted to false, misleading, and deceptive conduct under, and here's the act, that was breached. This is the basis of the lawyer's claim. And there it is. What's the date today, Peter? All right, so we got 3 weeks ago. On July the 10th, AICOM Australia settled the 2 lender lawsuits with RCM and Portigon. Settlement does not include the securities class action, Hopkins and his wife, which remains pending. You won't find that if you don't know where to look, but it's in the public domain. Bulens Holdings versus Arup. Again, class action suit. Bulens Holdings, lead applicant. There's the court file number. Claim for 50 million, settled. settled very, very recently indeed. Basis of the claim. ARP's forecasts were defective, misleading, and made without reasonable grounds. We're going to revisit this phrase, reasonable grounds, because it has immediate and important implications for the way we do business. And here's the basis of the claim. Here's what was breached. Corporations Act, because issuing a defective PDS is a breach of the Corporations Act. Breach connections in ARP. Again, the receivers acting on behalf of the banks to recover the bank debt. There's the court file number. Claim over $1 billion. Progress ongoing. Basis of the claim. Misleading and deceptive conduct. You start to see that there are common words. Misleading, deceptive. The PDS was not in accordance with statutory requirements. And the specific acts are given. And different claimants have different accesses or different extents of access to different acts depending on the information that they're party to. So for example, a big institutional investor will have far more information than a small retail investor, and therefore there are different acts used. And here's the big American one. Syncora, a monoline insurer, versus a whole load of people, and I can never remember who the hell John S. Laxmi is. There's the New York Supreme Court file reference number if you want to look it up. Claim to be determined, damages to be determined. Progress case has survived a motion to be dismissed. You can tell I work for the prosecution. They're very pleased that their claim for the case has survived the motion to dismiss. We're currently in the middle of fact discovery, where the lawyers are beavering away with their magnifying glasses to find out what's going on. Basis of the claim alleges that Macquarie engaged in a fraudulent scheme, allegedly, to manipulate the forecast supporting a bond offering, blah, blah, blah. So what does it mean? I'm not interested in what it means. We're not lawyers. But what does it mean to us as an industry? What does it mean to us as planners and modeling practitioners? Number one, nobody is in court because of forecasts, because of dodgy forecasts. Let's just make sure everybody understands this. Because there's no act of any parliament or act of any government that says forecasting has to be accurate. So there's no basis of a claim that lawyers could bring forward. People are not being sued for inaccurate forecasts because there's no cause of action. But there were emerging themes, and you see a common language, common words being used in the statements, in the slides I showed you for the different cases. Misleading or deceptive conduct, misleading or deceptive statements. These are the basis of the claim. Omissions, negligence. Negligence is difficult if anybody has an interest in law. You have to not only show a duty of care, you have to show that the duty of care has been breached. Content and format of statutorily required documentation, such as disclosures, PDSs, etc. Key issues for us. Did the forecaster act in accordance with competent professional practice? And the very first thing the lawyers ever asked me was, what are the standards for forecasting? And I said, there are none. And do you know what they did? Because it was just like a cash register ringing. We'll come back to this point, particularly in the context of the institute who brings us here today and the role of that institute in helping the modelling and planning profession going forward. Did the forecaster have reasonable grounds, always reasonable grounds for their forecasts at the time, irrespective of whether they turn out to be right or wrong? So you could actually be sued for having your forecast right, but it was based on unreasonable grounds. It's very unlikely that it would happen, but irrespective of whether they got it right or hopelessly wrong. Be aware of your audience. Who thought? Did anybody recognize any of the report covers I showed earlier? Who thought that Bain, 10,279 miles away, in the busy metropolis of Weald, population 1,220, plus me and my wife, would be looking at these reports? You've no bloody idea who's going to read your reports. Well, wakey, wakey. tread very carefully if you're adjusting inputs or assumptions based on client directions. Come on, I'm a realist. I know this goes all the time. I've done it regularly. But we've got to start to be a lot sharper. And I'm going to suggest ways in which we can sharpen up our attitude in this context. So I said to the lawyers, what about honest mistakes? Gulf, what if we just make an honest mistake? They said it's not a defense. In many jurisdictions, it differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. You may be liable if you were stupidly honest. And your actions fell below the standards reasonably expected of a professional forecaster. What is the standard reasonably expected of a traffic forecaster? I think it's time we actually set out what it is, because the lawyers are having an absolute field day in the absence of any buy-in, any collective buy-in to what the standards reasonably expected of a professional transportation forecaster actually is. Actually, they avoid dishonesty. They tend to avoid dishonesty. Number one, it's difficult to prove, but that's not the point. Does anybody know the first rule of litigation? Sniff out the money. That's the first rule of litigation. Go after the money. And the issue about dishonesty is often there are fraud exclusion contract clauses in the insurance documents that get the insurers off the hook, and you don't have access to the money anymore. So you don't sue on this basis, despite you may have a very good cause for suing on this basis, but you don't do it because it may destroy the pot of money you're trying to get at the end of the day. Clever people, these lawyers. Sniff out the money. Couple of things, couple of quotes. How am I doing for time? Not too bad. Pembroke was the judge in Lane Cove Tunnel, has raised concerns about the way in which traffic forecasting reports were drafted, including a lack of explanation for the basis of the assumptions and the conclusions reached. Exactly what our clients were saying to us earlier when we said, how could we do better? Lay out the basis of your assumptions and your conclusions reached. Off the record, speaking to one of the lawyers, something in your book, I did like that bit, something in Bain's book, which is for sale at the back of the room. Something in your book resonated with me. What do you mean something? It all should have resonated with you, mate. Base case assumptions should be consolidated in a single table. And perhaps a significance level applied to those that are the most important. So hold on a second. Did we not show a bridge diagram earlier, and we showed the individual components of traffic growth? Would it be very difficult to not only show what the magnitude of these components were, or the contribution was, but to attach some sort of, if only qualitative level of significance to it? Because it would have helped an awful lot if we had ended up in court. This is where I start to become controversial. What is this institute doing? Running little conferences? It's actually a bloody good conference. But I wonder if they could do a bit more. It's almost as if I was a transport modeler today, I'd almost look for a trade union to protect my interests. A collective body. I'm out there fighting the world by myself. I got big nasty banks screaming down the phone at me, effectively telling me what the forecast should be. Help! I need help. Maybe that's what the Institute should be doing, is helping us. What should we do? Update our terms and conditions? He updates his terms and conditions and the client goes to him because he's easier to deal with. So the bastards will pick us off one by one. If we try and do this unilaterally, lobby the professional bodies. Clarify and strengthen our professional responsibilities, not only to the client, to peers, to the community, to society. And if you look at a number of professional bodies around the world, very, very plainly, right in the front, it talks about the wider public interest. We have responsibilities beyond meeting the needs of our client. Well, hold on a second, maybe we better start being a little bit more vocal, collectively, so that we can not be picked off. A code of conduct, perhaps, emphasizing our obligations, integrity, and our client's responsibilities, getting the client to sign it. If we do this individually, we'll be picked off. If we lobby the Australian Institute and say, come on, we need help. We need some form of collective action here. We need a pro forma that we put in with every job that we're submitting, which says, these are our obligations very clearly, and by the way, Mr. Client, this is your obligation. Something needs to be done. Anybody subscribe to this? TMIP? Awesome, absolutely awesome, good stuff. This was a little comment recently. A lot of expert forecasters are dishonest charlatans, masquerading as professionals, who provide results they believe the clients want, regardless of the evidence, in the expectation of future lucrative engagement. This is a sad indictment that anybody thinks that this reflects what we really do. Yet, if we do not act collectively, this will become the norm. They'll just think we're hired guns. Did you go to university to do that? Did you study for 3, 4, 5, 6 years to do that? No. We have responsibilities, not only to our client, to society, to the community, to our peers, to the profession. And we need somebody to help us collectively. And the best people to help us collectively would be somebody like the Institute. Let's just recap. Key issues for practitioners from the law cases. Did the forecaster act in accordance with competent professional practice? So let's lay out what competent professional practice is, because if we don't, it would get us in court. Did the forecaster have reasonable grounds, always reasonable grounds for their forecasts, irrespective of whether they're right or wrong? Make all of your assumptions transparent. Tabulate it on a single sheet. Be aware of who your audience is. Or if not, be aware that your audience may be an awful lot wider than you believe. And tread very carefully if you're adjusting inputs and assumptions based on client directions. Maybe we put that back to the client. We say, this is the forecast based on these assumptions, single sheet. If you want to change it, that's fine. Go and do whatever you want. But our numbers refer to this sheet and this sheet alone. Come on, we're professional people. Let's raise the standard. Or else this notion will continue. What does the future hold? What does the future hold? Who saw The Futurologist? Do you know, we should actually play back. Oh, this is a bit nasty. Should I go there? Yeah. If you play back the presentation, you'll find that the futurologist spent 2/3 of his presentation talking about the past. It's very clever. And despite all the enthusiasm and overexcitement, did you really learn that much? No. I'm not saying it was, it's very useful to have, but we have to be a little bit careful. Let's talk about big data. I'm a big data skeptic. Big data, the future, coming together of everything. Everything comes together. Does it? Bugger. All these different data sources. And this is what I read time and time again. Big data clearly offers the opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Just show me. Bring it on. Show me what it offers the opportunity. Cell phones. We'll just track everybody's movement, and we'll have lovely OD matrices from cell phones. This is the view I polled 6 senior practitioners in the UK and said, what's your view? You're at the knife's edge, the coal face. A lot of promises, they said, but actually, to date, relatively limited practical applications. So, all very well, VLC telling us that they went to, where was it, San Francisco? And mined a big data set. And what did they do, actually? They looked for a big data set and they mined it to see if there's any information of value. Academically, it's interesting, but as practitioners, it's not how we work. We've got problems that we need solutions for. That's slightly different. Lots of promises, but relatively limited practical applications to date. Lots of academics running around, crunching data, preparing maps, still working out how it could be used, or if it could be used. Lots of confirmation bias, all the believers there telling each other how great this is. We've got to be a bit careful we don't get sucked into this. In the UK, it's very much a sector in sit back and wait mode. Large clients, Transport for London and Highways England, investing heavily. And the view from the consulting fraternity was very much, fine, let them do it. Let them do it. Let them spend the money and make the mistakes, and then we'll jump in afterwards. When the technology becomes commoditized. Lots of promise. Big data clearly offers the opportunity. This is the key question for me, and I think we'll probably go through a changing mindset, and that is initially we see it as an opportunity to replicate what we already do, and then somebody goes, bing! This gives us the opportunity to do things differently. That's the really exciting stuff for me. Just cheaper, well, that's bollocks, because what's happening is that the data vendors are working out that actually you're spending 100,000 on this type of survey anyway, so I'm going to charge you 85,000. All the pricing is what the market can bear. That's exactly how it's working at the moment. So it's not really cheaper at all, or certainly not that much cheaper. But this is the big question. Do we use it to do new things? Support tour modeling. Where's my Jacob's friend? There we go. For just one example. What are these? Yep. One brave chap goes, American states. They are. What are these? Bit more information, please. Bit more detail. No. Jesus. I'd be a very busy boy if these were class actions. Ah, good man. Who said that? The Jacobs boys are really quite bright, aren't they? Price-managed lanes. Price-managed lanes coming at us like a rash all over the United States. And here I'm just showing the ones, in fact, I'm not even showing all of them in operation today. There's more, and there's stacks more planned. What are they? Characterized by active management highways. How many times have we heard our politicians say, we can't afford new infrastructure, we've got to make better use of the asset, sweat the asset. Better utilization of existing assets to achieve specific policy objectives. Characterized by active management, management techniques, including eligibility, who pays, how much, do people travel for free, certain types of user, HOV 3+, low emissions vehicles traveling for free, access control, physical segregation, gates, entry points, exit points, long pipes, pricing, variable pricing, period of the day, direction, by section, or dynamic, changing every 3 minutes. With electronic charging, changing price becomes a change in the source code. Don't have to change any infrastructure. Easy peasy. Boy, oh boy, is that a modeling or forecasting challenge. We can't even get it right with static pricing. And we're going to enter a new world where people are saying, actually, we could use price in a more sophisticated way. We could manage demand across the network through intelligent pricing. Are we anywhere near being able to rise to that challenge? I do like a bit of Latin in my presentations. What does it mean? Anybody? Everything's perfect in threes. Everything's perfect in threes. It is the mantra of a good presenter. Because what do I want you to take away? It doesn't really matter what I want you to take away, but what I'll do is I'll present it in threes and you will take it away. But I actually want you to take away more than 3 things, so what I'll do is I'll divide them into threes. This is a proven presentational technique. Omni trium perfectum, the rule of 3. So here's my rules of 3. We started off at the very beginning looking at reports, and we said 80% of the effort, 80% of the intelligence and insight and value add went into the wrong place. We need to be redevoting, refocusing our efforts. We're calling them forecasting reports, after all. Clients, mine the volatility and uncertainty. Track it all the way through the architecture to the forecasts itself. Think me. Think me first and work backwards from there. Think client. Tell the story. Tell the story. Give me the narrative. What does it all mean? At the end of the day, the narrative may be more important than numbers, frankly. Lawyers. Forecasters are not being sued for forecasts. Our professional conduct has never been under greater scrutiny, yet we're so reactive. We should be out there being proactive. We should lay out the basis upon which we do this work. Clearly lay out our responsibilities and the responsibilities of our clients. Not individually, but collectively. And we need collective help. And institutions are the people to do it. This institution? I think so. That's up to the institution itself, and partly up to yourself. If you feel this is right, then lobby them. They're all here. You know the board members. Have a word. There's one there. Have a word with him. Say, actually, your conference was quite good, but I need a collective voice, and I need that collective voice to be raising the standards. I need the collective voice to be helping me as a professional, protecting me if necessary, because otherwise I'm out there and I can be picked off by myself. The future, using new techniques and technologies to do different things, not the same thing. This accelerating industry focus, it's not going to go away. How do we improve the utilization of existing assets? And price has to be central to that initiative. Pricing undoubtedly will become more sophisticated. Are we up to the modeling challenge? The rule of three. So there you go. A bit of fun with some serious messages. Thank you very much. Yeah. What we can do? How are we doing for time?
We've got plenty of time. We've got about 20 minutes. I think Peter's got a roving microphone. So has anyone got any questions from the floor? It was pretty provocative. It's a good segue for our next session that Peter's going to host, obviously, on what the TMN's going to, what our objectives are. But we do have some questions. So I think Tony over there has got the first.
Rob, just a quick and easy one. You showed us a lot of Australian covers there. Are those shortcomings you identified about the 20%, 80%, etc., are they common in other countries?
Absolutely. Let's be clear, a lot of what I've said you'll be looking at from an internal domestic perspective, but these are global issues. The issue of optimism bias is a global phenomenon. I did a lot of work in India for state governments and for central government, and there's going to be a huge problem in India because of aggressive bidding for highway concessions that are still under construction. We haven't even seen them open yet, and the whole sector is going to collapse. So there's nothing. The question you really should have asked is this: Luke, is there anything we particularly do badly in Australia? Shall we ask that?
Rob, is there anything we particularly do badly in Australia?
Well, yes, actually. It's funny you should mention that. You're very bad at politicizing things very quickly. And I don't mean people in this room, I mean generally. And that's to the detriment of what we're trying to do. Sensible infrastructure investment, balanced infrastructure investment. You're particularly bad at not listening to opponents. And the higher up you rise in the food chain, the worse this becomes. Where anybody who speaks out against you in any way is absolutely vilified through any medium at all possible. And that's just downright unhealthy. This creates a monoculture, very dangerous, and I've seen it. Can I talk East-West link? No, the lawyers won't let me. Melbourne, God bless it. Not a bad place. Shit weather, but not a bad place. It was bigger than Wheel's very nice, thank you.
Dave's down the front.
I actually like Melbourne, by the way. That was a joke.
How frequently have you come across a scheme that has been misconceived from the public side. In other words, politics or whatever is involved. And in the thing that came through was that, you know, in the industry we were sort of leaned on to try and make a scheme that perhaps didn't stack up at a more fundamental level, and then ended up coming through to analysis from a number of parties. And the other very quick one, I'll keep it quick, I promise, is in terms of the guidelines, and I'm much less familiar with legal stuff, thankfully, than yourself. How easy is it to define if somebody is to put up some guidelines? Presumably it's legally straightforward to say that these are guidelines and the responsibility still remains with the project party to determine whether you just follow the guidelines and say, right, I've followed the guidelines, job done. So how much does the risk transfer to the authorship of the guidelines?
Okay, a couple of points. First of all, there's a delightfully simple view of the world that says the private sector is big and nasty and the public sector has the monopoly on good practice and etc. Quite often, if you look at great forecasting catastrophes, they can be traced directly back to the public sector. The numbers were bent out of shape in the first place because there was an overemphasis on a single number called the benefit to cost ratio. So the numbers were bent out of shape to begin with, and everything collapses from there on. Who the hell is going to bid for a project and come up with lower traffic than the public sector did in the first place? So you've got to be very, very careful and look. I mean, why are we awarding infrastructure concessions on the basis of the biggest upfront capital that the public sector can get? Because what you actually do is you award the concession to the riskiest partner. Why would you do that? Not to the best long-term partner who's focused on long-term asset stewardship. So I think there are a number of issues about concession award criteria, and this is all public sector stuff, and a whole host of problems that we look at further downstream can be traced directly back to somebody bending the numbers out of shape to get the politicians' required benefit to cost ratio. Of course, the advantage you have in Australia is you don't publish the benefit to cost ratios anyway, so that gets away from that little problem. Second issue was some rambling question about the code of practice. Look, the code of practice idea is something that needs to be thought through very carefully, and I'm laying it on a bit thick to the Institute here. It's not something that the Institute could do overnight, and I'm not one for committees or whatever, but we do need, if you were seriously to think about setting some of this stuff out, you'd need to put a couple of things in place first. First of all, we need to have the buy-in of all the big consultancies in Australia. So we need to actively engage with them. And we need legal advice about how this could be worded and shaped, et cetera, et cetera. But I am absolutely convinced more than ever that it needs to be done. And the Australian catastrophes are so internationally known that you are the people really to lead the whole global industry in this. That's another issue you're going to have to consider. Different institutes have different views about advocacy, and they've got their own emphases. This is entirely for you to consider. One approach would simply could be to suggest, I think you should speak to brother and sister institutions and explain what direction you'd like to move in and why. The why is very simple. There is a whole bunch of our profession which is unprotected, and this is frankly downright unfair. And it's to the detriment of the profession going forward. So something needs to be done. Whether they want to join you or not is entirely up to themselves. But it's not something that could be done overnight. But trust me, make a noise at the beginning that you're going to do this, and it will send shockwaves across the whole industry. That hold on a second, this is a profession standing up and saying, actually, if I'm an expert witness in a court case, who's my primary responsibility to? It's not to the lawyers, it's to the court, it's to the judge. as planners or engineers or modelers, who is our primary responsibility to? Arguably, it's to society first. Well, I think we need to be saying that, frankly.
My interest is about the future and disruptive technologies. Do you see neural networks and quantum computers being such a disruptive technology?
What? I think computing power is the least of our problems. In fact, the dash to computing power. Oh, I could go off on a real tangent here. The computing bit is the easy bit. The easy bit. It's the people bits that's the difficult bit. It's the people bit we need to refocus on, to be perfectly honest. I'm just, you know, I listened to the futurologist and it was all about immediacy and urgency, as if immediacy and urgency was good. Actually, immediacy, for computers it may be, not necessarily for human beings. Look at jails. Jails are full of people who did things on the spur of the moment. Slow down. Don't lift the gun after drinking the tequila. How many times have you ended up in a relationship and thought, I should have taken that a bit easier at the beginning? No, seriously. I got an email. I'm just do not get bent out of shape about this 24-hour communication nonsense. I try and hide from people, never mind be in touch constantly. So, and I'm also Scottish, so I don't like spending any money. So I always use the Wi-Fi in the hotel. So I only ever get my emails when I go to the hotel. And I went to the hotel the other day, went back to the hotel, and there's my Brazilian client saying, any chance you could fly from Perth to Brazil for a couple of days? Now, actually, what had happened was I'd been away for so many hours that there was another email saying, don't worry, Rob, we got it sorted. And I'm thinking, shit, that was so dangerous, because if I had got that immediately, I would have probably got, well, I'll see what I can do, and they wouldn't have looked elsewhere, and the immediacy and urgency would have caused the problem. The fact that I paused, do you remember seeing the futurologist? There was something about the lady went through and her little boy had a temperature and she tapped through to the doctor and within seconds the thing. Jesus Christ, imagine the medical profession. How many medics would we need if every anxious parent immediately had access to the doctor? God forbid. Slow down. We're human beings. Slow down.
Would you consider the UK tag guidance as a possible model for a...
Yeah, you're taking, in terms of detail, you're taking me into levels of detail that I'm not, I don't work with WebTag on a regular enough basis to be able to comment. I do know that it's, look, I travel around the world and people use three things. They use Australian guidelines, New Zealand guidelines, and UK guidelines, and sometimes some federal stuff. And people are all copying each other, so they're all, coming to a sort of central thing. But I really do think that, the focus on technology or the focus on, calibration of validation criteria, that's not where the arguments are. The arguments are people, behavior, revisiting first principles. People travel to do stuff rather than dashing into, right, what does the regression equation look like? And, well, we'll make it like this because we've got data, rather than actually, this is how people behave. Sorry?
That tag guidance is about delivering a product. The front end of that product, back end of that technology. So it's got to focus exactly on who's the user of modeling is making decisions.
Could be, I couldn't comment materially. No, sorry?
Robert, I love the talk, and I agree with almost everything you said. But it does seem, it does seem that there's a core conflict at the heart of some of the things that you're saying. In that, on one hand, you're talking about the importance of, bringing out our insight and innovation, and building tools as required for the particular task, and thinking first before we just go to our standard practice. And on the other hand, you're saying that there's a need for us to codify and develop professional standards that, at least to some degree, to fill the needs that you're saying that the lawyers have, are going to have to be fairly prescriptive in terms of the things that we're going to have to do. I mean, the talk we heard yesterday afternoon about concrete requiring a certain cement content, and then, when you have innovation in concrete, it's no longer, compliant with the standards. It seems to me any standards that we have that are going to have anything about actual practice rather than, a statement of responsibilities are going to lead to directly conflict with the, that first message you were saying about the requirement to fit for purpose.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the wonderful thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. That's an old joke. But I'm here to throw stuff out at you guys. I mean, nothing really I've said today comes as a tremendous light bulb moment for any of you. I'm maybe reflecting it back to you in a little bit more polarized fashion. And we're not going to answer this issue of what a code of conduct might look like, etc. What it does mean is practitioners have to be clearly engaged in this, which is why it isn't a thing that can happen overnight. But just because we can't see the end of the road doesn't mean we shouldn't take the first step. And I think we should take the first step today, here. And when we see institute board members, we say, actually, there was something in that. Let's become a bit more proactive.
Thank you. Yeah, one key point is about figures and uncertainty. So we're talking about statistics. But it is difficult to communicate statistical concepts to clients. And you said don't overdo the mathematical gobbledygook, but it is there. And if you underdo it, then they say, well, this is all just words. Do you think the solution is you mentioned graphics as a way to communicate? Because we've got to communicate confidence intervals, sensitivity analysis. Absolutely. If we ignore that, that's the problem, isn't it?
No. And as I said, your clients aren't stupid. These are educated men and women, so they will understand what a confidence interval looks like.
Will they? Sometimes people say they hate statistics.
Well, they may well hate statistics. That might be because it's a page of mathematical formulas that throw in at them rather than what you're suggesting, and that is illustrations. The best reports... Look, there's a couple of things we need to rethink about our reports. First of all, we need to think about the reader. Think about Bain. He's got to read the bloody thing at the end of the day. Now, the other thing is, how about a beginning, middle, and an end? That'd be quite useful. Something. How about thinking end? How about starting the report the day you're commissioned? How about starting writing the report from day one? Yeah, you can't populate it with the answers, but you know roughly what sort of... And it starts to identify the gaps, the questions you need to answer, etc., etc. I do think that the best ones I read use a combination of imaginative graphics and worked examples. And if somebody isn't interested, they don't have to read the panel. But if somebody says, oh, what? Yeah, you read the panel and I'll do the little maths and I'll show you what it means, little assignment diagram or whatever. I think communications is really one of my key messages. We need to be better at
Last question.
Oh, thank you. Rob, I've worked for some large consultancies who do forecasting work, and the big consultants now are quite sophisticated in terms of having their own in-house legal teams. And when a brief comes in, it needs to go through the legal team, and they vet the terms and conditions and so on. Anything that has toll road forecasting on it, immediately a red flag goes up, and if you want approval to put in a bid, you normally have to get, it goes up like the CEO has to approve it, and there's a risk assessment done, and some of the cases you put up here on the screen about the dollars we're talking about, in some cases in the billions, that has to be compared with the professional fees that we're talking about to do a traffic modeling report, which is probably in the hundreds of thousands, maybe in some cases it might be in the millions, but it's dwarfed by the liabilities. And I just think that the bigger consultants may just decide, we're not going to do this kind of work anymore.
Yep. And
the only consultants who are going to do this kind of work are the ones who don't know what the risks really are.
But I think it's such a mistake And I think it's such a pity that some major entities have left this space because nobody is being sued for forecasts. You saw what I put up time and time again. It was about misrepresentation and about lack of disclosure. Well, these are issues that are far bigger than toll roads. These are nothing that are specifically and only related to toll roads. I would desperately sorry when I hear that people have exited toll road forecasting space because I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. Look at how you present your assumptions, your methodology. Be transparent. That's the way to stay out of jail, not avoiding toll roads.
All right. I think that almost brings us to a close. Rob, I think that was absolutely fantastic. On behalf of the AITPM, we really like to thank you for your time, and Rob has donated his time for free, so it's been obviously quite popular amongst everyone. Rob has promised me, he did give me a free copy some time ago. He said, but as long as you promote it, to sell the other one. So he has got, there's a little stand at the back. Yes, Ben's holding up one of the books there. So the other merchandise is for free, but the books are $50. You'll see there's a yellow sticker with the $50 on it. Cash only, it doesn't have FPOS facilities. And I'm happy to take cash as well. So that brings us to the end of our first session. We've got a 15-minute break out there. We've got a tight schedule, so please make sure we're all back here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank Rob Bain.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.